I feel like I've been back forever. Got classes on Sundays, so I even forgot there was a vacation. But basically, today we're gonna do a bit on leadership. We're gonna finish up the leadership talk, and then we're gonna get into discussion of power. It's an important topic. You guys have a discussion board due on Moneyball, and we'll talk about that later with the HR stuff. It's a useful thing to watch. So today, let me review a little bit about what we were talking about with leadership, and then we'll move into the power and influence stuff. So basically, we were talking about Fiedler's contingency model, and I think I said that um, it could be applied to 12 o'clock high. Uh, you could you can find quite a few parallels in there. I also mentioned situational leadership theory of Hersey and Blanchard, which is also a contingency theory that says how um, direct you have to be with motivating people. It depends on the followers. So if followers are incompetent, but they're willing, then you have to direct them. But if they're competent and committed, then you can delegate to them. In between is selling and participating. So if they're competent but not committed, then you try to sell them on the course of action. A lot of these theories are somewhat dry, and I'm not sure how useful they are to get you to think about how to lead people when you're in that role. But I think it's also true that your problem isn't so much how to lead people, but how to become a leader. So in other words, if now I was saying in the first section, I don't know that everyone wants to be a leader. You know, I think there are pros and cons in life to playing a leadership role and not. A lot of people prefer the less degree of stress and less degree of effort. I don't know if stress is the word, but it can be just as stressful to be a follower as a leader. But I think the effort to become a leader is not always worth it to everybody. So the question is, do you want to be a leader? And if so, how do you become so? And that has to do with power and influence stuff that we're going to talk about in a little while. So basically, some contingency theories that focus on followership instead of leadership. I think we also mentioned were the leader participation model and the shared leadership theory. And the idea of the leader participation model is that leaders should determine the extent to which leadership problems require participation and then share the responsibility. And if you look again at 12 o'clock high, I think you can kind of see sort of an implicit application of the leader participation model with especially when Savage criticizes Gately, arrests Gately for being off the base, but he criticizes him for not shouldering some of the burden that Davenport faced. And I think he's implicitly saying that he should have been a better follower. And this is related to the leader participation model. Leadership can also be viewed as a shared process, and this is also relevant. He's kind of in the film. He's kind of looking for leaders who can substitute for him because he's only there temporarily, really. And the idea of the shared leadership theory is that leadership is an emergent state in which leadership roles are distributed across followers, and everyone can be a leader. So leadership is collective. And also, there's a followership theory that focuses on the capabilities of followers and to what degree are followers able to put a leader's vision into practice? What makes followers good followers? And traits like industriousness, enthusiasm, organizational citizenship behaviors. And I think this is also related to the ideas, I was also talking in the other section about fiduciary duty. Um, oh, I think I've got a few in the waiting room. So the idea of fiduciary duty, let me just put this on the board here. And the idea of fiduciary duty is that employees occupy a position of trust. And fiduciary means that you occupy a position of trust. Trying to admit them. What's that very? Fiduciary means that you occupy a position of trust. So, like banks and financial executives, financial officers, like stockbrokers and people like that, this idea is very important. And banks often call themselves fiduciary or the trust company, or they use terms like Fidelity Bank, and this idea of fidelity, it's related to faithfulness, so you're occupying a position of trust, which means that you have a legal obligation to serve the person that's the beneficiary of the trust. And part of that is when you're an employee, you're really a fiduciary to your employer. And a lot of people don't think about that. I know when I took HR, I was an HR major in my doctoral program. I have a PhD basically in HR and human resource management. And I took a whole program in that, a lot of courses. I read a lot of books, more than you could shake a stick at. And I don't think once in the entire HR literature I heard anyone mention the idea that employees are fiduciaries. And I don't think the point is emphasized. And I don't think a lot of people think about it, but it's really true. And it's true legally. And you can be like, if you take the trade secrets of a corporation and you work for somebody and you take them and you bring them to somebody else, or you reveal them or something, you have breached your fiduciary duty, and the company can sue you financially for violating their legal expectations. And these duties do exist in law. And so people haven't thought much about what the ethical ramifications of these are. Unfortunately, much of which passes as business ethics in colleges, it focuses on things like, save the whales, or, social problems that really aren't that relevant to the companies, and doesn't focus on like what are the things that you as an employee are ethically obliged to do. And it's a lot harder to worry about that than to worry about saying other people should do this or that somebody else is unethical because the production process is not environmentally acceptable or something like that. And it's easy to pass judgment on others. That's easily done. But it's a lot harder to say, I'm going to do the right thing in my life and in my job. And I think part of that And it's also, I think, a way, it's a power and influence technique as well, is that you consider yourself to be a fiduciary to your employee. And so you aim to gain their trust. And in doing so, you look for the interests of the people you work for. Now, I'm not saying it's an unlimited thing, like you don't commit crimes or anything, but what I'm saying is that that should be an employee's first commitment. And if that is indeed what how you think, you're gonna win over your boss to a much greater degree than otherwise. And so that's how people move ahead, is by thinking that way. But for some reason, it's not, that point of view is not discussed a lot. Followership theory suggests that it should be. So followership theory focuses on the capability of followers to put a leader's vision into practice. And it emphasizes traits like industriousness, enthusiasm, and organizational citizenship behavior. Poor followers are prone to insubordination, incompetence, and conformity. In times of crisis, when there is a crisis, much leadership involves transactional behavior, and charismatic leaders can be visionary, or they can be crisis responsive, that where they start with a plea for action and then justify the action by communicating its effective results. I also wanted to talk about leader member exchange theory. There are always going to be in the world in groups and out groups, subordinates with in group status. In group meaning that you're favored, you're in the favored group. Subordinates with in group status tend to do better. They get higher performance ratings, they have lower turnover, they have higher job satisfaction. So you always want to be in the in group. Competent, proactive, meaning they seize the opportunity. Competent, proactive, and conscious followers tend to be in the in group. Leaders and followers in the in group develop high quality relationships and social capital. So they develop strong relationships, and this is totally normal. I was talking in the other class about Rosabeth Moss Cantor's book in the 1970s, Men and Women of the Corporation. And basically in that book, she talks about the importance of trust in being part of the leadership core. But she says that men at that time, this is a long time ago now, didn't trust women. They didn't trust them to be a part of their group. And so the women were often being discriminated against because the men didn't trust them. And I don't think she was saying that that trust isn't important. You know, trust is highly important to any kind of leadership relationship or any kind of managerial relationship. This goes back to Chester Barnard and the functions of the executive. He talks about how trust is far more important to political relationships than competence. So basically, a psychological state of mutual expectations or trust will encourage risk-taking, information sharing, productivity. And I think the way that you enhance the likelihood that you'll be trusted is to be a good fiduciary. So in other words, your legal obligation to your firm is also a moral, it points in a moral direction as to how you should behave. I have to say, I doubt a lot of employees think this way, and I don't think a lot of people are taught this in business school. which is unfortunate. I'm not sure of the reason. So basically, they're always going to be in groups and out groups. And I mean, you can see this in society as well, that socially there are insiders who have much greater access to opportunities. And your problem is to how to get access to those opportunities. And so part of it is that if you want to be part of the in group, you can work your way in by getting people to trust you and proving you're trustworthy. Um, I, in my own life, I never really tried to be part of an in group, and I think I did perfectly well. And I think one of the ways you can get around it is by thinking, instead of being part of a group, developing your own resource base. In part, power, we'll talk about that when we talk about power in a minute. The power comes from control, in part, I'm not saying totally, control of resources. So if you create a life where you're resource rich, in other words, you save your money, and you think about how you're going to get to a point where you live off your investments rather than your employment. And I think the book Rich Dad Poor Dad talks about that, but I always forget that guy's name. Is Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a great book if you haven't read it, by Kiyosaki. He's quite a character. I often see him on the podcasts. It's a good book. It's well worth reading, and he basically says what I just said, that you need to think in terms of developing your own resource base and making money off investing rather than labor. Again, a lot of people don't think that way, and to the extent that you do, ultimately, now I'm not saying it's easy at first, because you have to save your money and maybe work extra to put money away, but have a second job or something. But ultimately, that's how once you have a separate resource base, then you don't have to worry about power and politics as much. I mean, you can if you want, but it kind of allows you to separate yourself from problems like that. So basically, trying to cover some of the material here. I wanted to mention a few ideas. Leader-member exchange theory. The idea of leader-member exchange theory is that leaders and members have unique relationships that, I was just doing leader-member relation. I was thinking of the full-range leadership model. The full-range leadership model talks about the degree to which leaders need to intervene with followers, and the least intervening, and you can apply this to 12 o'clock high as well. What kind of leader was Davenport? What kind of leader was Savage? You could make the claim that Davenport was a laissez-faire leader. Laissez-faire meaning passive, not doing a lot, and the members learned to abdicate their roles. I think that was kind of Davenport's approach. Transactional leaders guide their followers, and some examples of that are management by exception and contingent reward. Management by exception meaning that leaders put out fires, monitor performance, and interact with followers, whereas contingent rewards just mean that you paid for performance and there's an exchange. The employees do good and the leader rewards them. Uh, More intervening, and arguably Savage was at this level. Through the years, a couple of students have made this point, is that transformational leadership is transactional. It builds on transactional leadership, but it produces effort beyond what transactional leadership can do. So transformational leadership is more important for group performance. It focuses on getting people to change how they perform, organizational citizenship behaviors, uh, inducing group satisfaction. Uh, it focuses on creating positive emotions among the rank and file, motivating people, employees identifying with the leader, improving the quality of exchange, and improving justice among the employees. I think Savage in 12 O'Clock High fits this to a large degree, but he also fails at a higher level, which it would be like individualized consideration. He doesn't give a clear vision and sense of mission. Um, uh, Authentic leadership uh, means that the leader is honest. So the authentic leaders know what's important to them, are anchored by their principles, listen to others, and display their true selves. Authentic leadership predicts group performance well. If you have a highly honest leader, you're going to be more highly motivated. There's going to be more trust. Leaders who practice what they preach observe improved follower outcomes. So when Savage says, I'm going to fly with you, I'm going to take the same risks you are, that's authentic leadership. Okay, you see that in the movie The Fog of War, which you're going to watch, that Curtis LeMay, when he told them that anyone who turns back is going to be arrested, which is similar. You can sort of sense Savage in that also, that the characters are related. When he said that to his group, he also said, I'm going to fly with you and I'm going to take the same risks you do. Okay, and that's real leadership. You know, you could say, well, you don't like Curtis LeMay's a mean guy and he's brutal, and you know McNamara makes that clear, and he was. He was very aggressive militarily, but the point is that he was a great leader, and that's why he rose in the Air Force. You know, I think probably a successful country will have people like that, Andrew Jackson or Curtis LeMay, that sort of person. But basically, they should be contained. You know, if they get too much power, then that becomes dangerous. In the case of Andrew Jackson, he was able to. He actually, in his presidency, did some things that were probably just as bad. We won't go into that, especially related to Native Americans. We won't go into that. But so in any case, you know, getting back to the full range leadership model. So, you know, you start with the lowest level of involvement is laissez-faire, and then somewhat more transactional leadership, somewhat more transformational leadership, somewhat more individualized consideration where you provide a vision, and somewhat more intellectual stimulation where you communicate high expectations, you use symbols to focus efforts and express important purposes in simple ways. Inspirational motivation can refer to communicating high expectations, using symbols to focus efforts, expressing important purposes. And sometimes there can be confusion between transformational and charismatic leadership. Charismatic leaders make value-based appeals and communicate through symbolic and value-laden means. And when Weber created this concept, it was associated with religion and religious leaders. Whereas transformational leaders focus on what they are communicating rather than how they communicate. So in other words, someone like Savage was probably more transformational in that he focused on communicating the importance of the task, whereas charismatic leaders focus on symbols. Savage did not look at vision enough. And so I think that was a shortcoming of his. He didn't get to that individualized consideration point. Authentic leaders know what's important to them and are honest. I think a great example of this is, or not example, but discussion of this is the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is about, he isolated the top performing firms in the S&P 500 and then tried to figure out why are they such good performers. And what he found is that the one thing that differentiated them was the integrity and selflessness, the servant leadership of the leader. So basically, servant leadership means going beyond self-interest to focus on opportunities that help followers grow and develop. And servant leaders listen or empathize, are stewards and help develop the followers. And it's related to authentic leadership, obviously, because you can't be a servant leader if you're not authentic. And certainly leaders who practice what they preach observe improved follower outcomes. So what Collins did, he interviewed people at these firms, and he found that high-performing firms will have these great leaders who are basically servant leaders. He didn't use the term, but it's the same idea. And then he says he asked the leader, why, the CEO, why his firm is so highly performing. And he said, this firm is lucky because we have the best group of employees in history. We've got I have a great team. They get everything done. They're amazing. And then he went to the employees. He went to the people that reported to the CEO, and he said to them, he asked them, why is the firm important? He asked the same question. And they said, the reason the firm is important is the CEO. That we've never had a boss like this, the most amazing boss we ever had. So in other words, they both gave each other credit. And this is characteristic of servant leadership, that and it's also related to ethical or unethical leadership, that leaders serve as ethical role models to be followed and demonstrate appropriate behavior. But I think it's more than that, that the great, good to great CEOs that Jim Collins identified listen, empathize, accept, persuade, or stewards, and develop their followers' potential. And that is precisely what a servant leader is. Okay, so it's very, very common for leaders to be abrasive. A survey in monster.com found that 76% of respondents claimed they have a toxic or abusive supervisor. Now, part of this is the personality of the people reporting it. So in other words, people with negative worldviews are more likely to report abusive supervision. If you think that everybody who's successful is a crook, you're going to hate your boss. All right, so I've had students say that to me. So you know that there's stuff in you that will make you perceive these things. But it's also true a lot of bosses are abusive. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. So basic abusive supervisors tend to be narcissistic. They tend to have negative worldviews themselves. So in other words, the people who complain about abusive supervisors, when they become supervisors, are abusive supervisors. So basically, if you you look politically, people who say that they're oppressed by the government and everything's evil and so on, what happens when they get power? What are they going to do? All right, it's something to think about. So basically, abrasive supervision leads to counterproductive work behaviors, CWBs. We talked about people will try to sabotage the company, and so it'll backfire. So basically, let me move in now. Oh, I forgot to take attendance. Let me do that. Today is the 17th of April. And don't forget, your discussion board is due tonight. Okay, let me expand this a little, type small. Okay, Farhad.
Mayor.
Hello. Ahmed Alcor. Mohammed Afi.
Here.
Hello. Jenna Bell. Joseph Catanzaro.
I'm here, Professor.
Joseph. Jimin Chen.
I'm here.
Hello. Janine Cola.
I'm here.
Hello. Kermia Cyrus. David Esterovsky.
I'm here, Professor.
David. Marimar Garcia.
Here.
Monica Garcia.
Here.
Okay. Gotcha, Monica. Alexia.
Here.
Hello. Kanie.
Here.
Hello. Yusuf.
Here.
Hello. Georgie Karimlishvili.
Here.
Hello. Summer. Summer Lamb. Han Jian Lin.
Here.
Hello. Hamdi Molly.
Here.
Hello. Ludley. Ludley Null. Manuel.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay, Ludley, gotcha. Manuel Plamakis.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you, Manuel. Raquel.
I'm here, Professor. Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, I missed Famita Patwari.
Hello, Professor Amir.
Hello. Raquel, I did. Jishan Ruan. Brendan Samuel.
Morning, Professor. Here.
Good morning. Aliyah Todd. Stacy Ergiles.
Here, I'm here. Good morning.
Hello, Stacy. Denasia.
Here.
Hello. Jack Wu. Jack Wu. Yayin Zhang. Yayin.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay, Yayin, gotcha. Yichuan Zhang.
Here, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Taryn Sander.
Hi, here.
Hello. Matthew Zhao,
Here, Professor.
hello. Christian Mendez. Janaya Pratt. Alex Betts. And Jack Shrem.
Here, Professor.
Okay. I'm gonna call the name. Let me just check the chat for a second. I made this bigger so I can see it. Now I can't see the chat. Okay. Okay, here's Alex. All right.
Professor, I don't know if you called my name, but I'm here.
Who is this?
Carmaya Cyrus.
I'm also here. It's Alexander.
Okay, Alex.
Thank you.
Got Kamaya.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I've got Alex. Okay. I'll just call the names of the people who didn't answer at this point. Ahmed Alcor, Jenna Bell, Summer Lamb.
Here.
Okay, Summer. Jishan Ruan, Stacy Ergiles. No, Stacy I have. Sorry, Stacy. Aaliyah Todd. I don't have. Aaliyah Todd. Jack Wu. Christian Mendez. Jemiah Pratt.
Janaya, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Okay. All right. So now we're getting into power. This is an important topic. It really drives a lot of what happens to people in their careers and in their lives, like how much power you're able to develop. And I would say you can gain power and you can use it intelligently, and you can learn to do this. But of course, there are some people who have more access to it than others. So, people who are more privileged have more access to power. That pretty much goes without saying. And this guy was saying America's an evil country because some people have more money than others and so get better treatment. The thing is, though, if you try to have a situation where everyone has the same amount of money, then there's no incentive to do anything. And so the society stagnates and falls into, where a lot of socialist countries are, which is poor. So in other words, in order to have the more free the economy is, the more innovation there is and the more economic progress there is. But I mean, to think that you're going to get economic progress if everyone gets paid the same amount is kind of, it's like asking for a square circle. If you pay everyone the same, nobody's going to do extra. There might be one in a billion, but very little. Whereas if people know that by taking risks and innovating, they're going to get more, then you get much more innovation. But one of the byproducts of that is that some people have more than others. So it's characteristic of a progressive society that you have, not the way the term is used in politics, but in the way the ordinary meaning of the term progress. The only way to have progress is to have some degree of income inequality. Now, of course, you could say, well, Plato said that there should be 5-to-1 income inequality, but Athens had zero technological progress. I'm not downplaying Athens. I have the utmost respect for Athens, more so than most commentators, or most of whom, if you read the newspapers, the people who write there don't even know what Athens was. But what I'm saying is that, well, it's true that Athens was an immensely creative place. They put very little stock in technological innovation or business progress. And most of what they succeeded at was cultural and political. So basically, and this is what Aristotle says. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. He says that the highest virtues are, pursuing philosophy and pursuing politics, and those two. The highest is philosophy, second politics, and those two are valuable human pursuits without a doubt, but they don't create economic progress. And so, like, using Plato as a model for today's world is, to me, either ridiculous or, naive. So basically, you're always going to have differentials in power in society. And this, incidentally, this was true in the socialist countries as well. The socialist meaning Marxian socialist countries, that there was very strong power differentials between insiders and outsiders, and the leaders of the Communist Party had immense powers, like Xi Jinping now, and the average person in the society had much less power and also had much less wealth. And so there was also maybe even greater income inequality under socialism than there is now. And I would say that a lot of the government intervention that supposedly is meant to temper income inequality in our society has the unforeseen effect of increasing it by subsidizing the stock market through government debt. So by monetary creation. So basically, low interest rates boost the stock market. So the same people who object to income inequality favor more debt, which means more government borrowing, more, in other words, monetary expansion, I mean to say, which in turn leads to more income inequality. So, it's kind of a paradox, but more income inequality actually lifts up even the poorer people, is sort of a thing. But what my point is, that if you do want to get power, whether you're in a socialist state or a capitalist one, you need to get in with the in crowd. It was a song in the 60s, "In with the in crowd." And that's basically what you have to do to get power. So if you're not, someone who's likely to get admitted to the Skull and Bone Society of Yale, which is a secret society at Yale where the top, or not the top, but the most likely 15 people in the senior class are picked by the Skull and Bone Society to be members. And it's 15 people a year, and it's may have been around for, I don't know, 120 years or something. But out of that, say 1,800 or 1,500 people, there have been 3 presidents. There have been like countless senators, congressmen, a lot of famous people, actors. Paul Giamatti, for example, is in it, and a lot of other people. So, I mean, this is like a built-in access to a network, which enables you to move forward. But the thing is, can you develop these kinds of contacts on your own without this? And the answer is yes, you can, and people do. Robert McNamara, who came from a poor background himself, ended up an insider. Someone I know once called him a useful idiot, but whatever he was definitely an insider. And when you see the movie about him, he talks about how he went to elementary school in a one-room schoolhouse in rural California. And basically, he was able to parlay this through his understanding of power. And one thing in David Halberstam's book, The Best and the Brightest, which is about the Kennedy administration, he spends 2 chapters on, I think it's chapters 12 and 13, on McNamara, and a lot of they used to read those chapters a lot in business schools, in OB classes like this one, because it really depicted the model of somebody who is very adept at gaining power. And the anecdote that one of the anecdotes that Halberstam tells is that a guy who worked for him came to him and he said, I've been offered the job of White House press secretary. Should I accept the job? If you follow the news, you know that the White House press secretary gets a lot of publicity. They're on TV all the time. They get a lot of national attention, but often you don't hear about them after. You kind of hear about them a lot for a couple of years, and then they disappear, and you never hear of them again. Like they don't run for president or anything. And McNamara said to the guy, no, you shouldn't, because the position has no power. And then he proceeded to analyze every single job in the White House. He knew off the top of his head which jobs had power and which jobs didn't have power. And he could tell you right off the bat. And he was so concerned with power that he studied all the branches he was dealing with to understand who had power and who didn't. And if you understand power in politics, you understand that if you know who has power, you know who to cater to. And this is exactly what Robert Moses did. Who in the class besides Alexander, who was in my other class, who in the class can tell me? There are a couple other people, actually. I think Ludley's in this class also, and some other. But who can tell me who Robert Moses was? Anyone? No one knows. Anyone knows? Alex, who is it? Or Ludley, who is Robert Moses? You should know. Ludley? All right, very interesting. Well, anyway, Robert Moses built a lot of the infrastructure of New York. So pretty much everything you deal with on a day-to-day basis, he built. So things like the bridges, the highways, the parks. Not Central Park, was from long ago, but the playgrounds, Jones Beach, the UN building, all kinds of things. He built pretty much all the highways and a lot of the bridges and tunnels. So like the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, now called the Hugh Carey Tunnel, is something he built, and Midtown Tunnel and so on. So basically, if you look at how he gained power, it was very similar to McNamara's story, which was that he became very good friends through personal introduction. He became very good friends with the governor of New York, and they became fast friends. And then he was able to get any job he wanted because he had this connection. And once he was able to do that, he had a vision for what he wanted to accomplish. And once he did that, he put himself in positions where he was able to effectuate his vision, where he was able to make his vision a reality. So I think there were two big elements in Robert Moses's ascent. Well, there are more than two, but a few of them were, number one, that he had a vision for what he wanted to accomplish. Number two, he met the right people and developed relationships with them. Number three, he had a relentless willingness to do things that would enhance his power. And number four, he was smart and able to put these things into effect often through manipulative means. So basically, I think power is a complex subject. How to get it is complex, but a lot of it is networking, developing long-term relationships, and making choices that enhance your power. So basically, power just means the capacity, discretion, and means to enforce your will over others. It's a function of dependence. The more people rely on a powerful person, the more powerful that person becomes. But I think your book overestimates the extent to which power is downward, and in fact could be lateral. I would say power in our world is more lateral, or even people can exercise power upward at times to a degree that I don't think your book gives sufficient credence to. So basically, power certainly exists when somebody has resources that others want. But it could also be that you can get power by getting others to trust you or developing relationships with them. And so not all power is formal, not all power is positional, and not all power is downward looking. Formal or positional power is based on an individual's position in the organization. It comes from the ability to coerce or reward from legitimate authority. Legitimate power, in turn, is based on someone's position in the organization. Now, you could argue that a lot of power has sources other than just your position. And the idea of charisma was Weber's insight that power in large part comes from people's emotional reactions to somebody, or to the emotional content that people advocate. Legitimate power is based on position, but personal power comes from the individual and from characteristics and expertise, the admiration of others, such as you would see with charisma. Referent power is based on identification with a person who has desirable resources or personal traits. This contradicts the dependence postulate, but it can be an important source of power. Different bases of power are effective depending on the perceptions and characteristics of the dependent. So in other words, there are many ways to gain power, and there are many sources of power. In the case of David Geffen, the rock impresario, who's on the Forbes 400, I think he's number 93 in the Forbes 400. He went to Brooklyn College for a year. Geffen gained power in part because he was extremely sharp at business, but was like the rock musicians. So he blended in with them and was friendly with them and hung out with them, but then he could represent them effectively. So they really liked him, and that gave him incredible power in that field. And so a lot of the top musicians ended up signing with him, including people who are of an older generation. So people like John Lennon and Bob Dylan, who are a little bit older than he was, signed with him also eventually. And his record label, Asylum Records, was his first label, spoke to his vision that he would protect the artists, that he would look out for the interests of the artists, and he would give them asylum. And this in turn helped him gain power. So basically, different contexts generate different sources of power. If you have resources that are important, you can gain power. So group structure influences power. there are different forms of group structure. And these can be applied. So I've got the whiteboard on, and these apply to organizations as well as small groups. So you have like a wheel type of relationship where there's one person at the center and many people report to the person at the center. And this kind of structure, if you picture the one at the center as being at a higher level, then you have sort of a traditional organization structure, hierarchy. But if they're at the center and everybody has to give them information, that gives the person at the center a lot of power. You could also have a chain type of relationship where people don't talk directly, but they talk to each other through other people. And that could be hierarchical, in which case there would be downward communication, which would be authoritarian, basically. But or you could have an all channel kind of thing. Let's say you've got 5 people, so it looks like a house or a home run plate, a home plate, and everybody reports to everybody else. Or everybody talks, not reports, but talks to everybody else. I'm missing a few, something like that. And so everybody is in communication with everyone else, and that's more egalitarian, more equal in nature. Personality obviously affects whether people gain power. Personality traits such as the dark triad traits, which are psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. These traits will contribute to whether somebody gets power. How insensitive to others, influence you are can affect how much power you obtain. How conscious of other people you are, in other words, your emotional intelligence, your extroversion and conscientiousness, all of these contribute to how much power someone can get. Now, there's a difference between power and influence. Okay, power means that you have the authority. Influence means you can use the power. And you can see a sharp difference in different presidents. 2 examples are Carter and Johnson. Johnson was the president from 64 to 68. He assumed office, no, 63, I'm sorry, 63 to 68. He assumed office when Kennedy was assassinated, and then he won one election and then didn't run again. And Carter also was a one-term president. Johnson was far more effective at using power, I should say, than Carter. So Johnson was able to get the Civil Rights Act passed. He was able to, he gained a lot of power, not something I like, but he was able to do it. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution gave Johnson a lot of power, and he was able to get it passed. It gave him the authority to declare war without the consent of Congress. And he was able to get all of these things done for good or ill, whereas Carter could get nothing done. There was a hostage crisis in Iran, and he wasn't able to solve it. The economy was in terrible straits, and every other day there was a new economist and couldn't figure out what to do and who to believe, and there was no real direction. And then he ends up doing the right thing. He appointed Paul Volcker, who did end the inflation, but he did it at a point where, in order to end the inflation, there has to be a recession. And so the recession was just as the election was coming, which, a lot of people are, they're dumb, and they blame the president for the recession. In a way, it's true, because he appointed Paul Volcker, but the only way you would end inflation is with a recession. So, so people get mad and they vote against the president because of the recession. And so he lost office as a result. So, this was like really ineffective. And so different people have different abilities at influence tactics. You can learn how to be influential. Could you excuse me for 1 second? I have just a small problem. I just have to deal with it for 1 minute. I'll come right back. Okay. Sorry about that. I had to go to the bathroom. The bug guy, the exterminator, came. So basically, personality traits. I was saying personality traits contribute to your ability to gain power. And I was talking about influence tactics, and so there's a whole bunch of influence tactics that your book talks about, and they're all useful. So basically, the way your book uses the term legitimacy is that you rely on authority and your position to exercise power. You also can use rational persuasion. You can also use inspirational appeal, consultation, exchange, or reciprocity. So in other words, like a transactional kind of leadership. Personal appeal, such as friendship or loyalty. You can use ingratiation. You can use pressure or retribution. You can use coalitions or group pressure. You can use rational persuasion and consultation. And basically, all of these are possible influence tactics. I think part of the reason Johnson was more effective than Carter as president was the connections he had made in Congress. And he also learned how to manipulate Congress. He had been Speaker of the House for a long time. He was a far more experienced politician than Carter. That's not to say that a governor can't make a good president. One example is Franklin Roosevelt, who was also very good at using power. He was I think a lot of it has to do with an understanding of power, how you get that. We're studying it here, but I think people who are around power can see how it operates, and they can figure it out. Or sometimes it's personality. I think it's sort of like an IQ thing, like you sort of have mental power gene that makes people perceptive about power, but you can learn how to do it. There's no question. So anyway, what kinds of influence tactics should you use in applying power? Downward relationships require probably rational persuasion. You don't want to use your forcing approach too often. So you want to inspire your followers, you want to ingratiate them, you want to have legitimacy. Upward influence, you usually would be rational persuasion, not much more. Lateral influence is so in other words, downward you would use inspirational, rational, ingratiation. Upward primarily rational, and then laterally you would use things like rational persuasion, consultation, things. If you deal with your equals, you've got to use more of an exchange, more of appealing to people. Okay, now people give in to influence tactics to different degrees, and I think the general public is highly susceptible to authoritarian control and to the influence of authority. I think a lot of people resent it and complain about it, but I think then in general, most people, or even the ones who complain about it, are highly susceptible to it. So basically, the reason is that automatic processing means that people make relatively superficial consideration of evidence and information, and they take little time or effort to think about what they're being asked to do. And basically, if you just say, well, and usually the world is benign, so therefore I'll trust what people are telling me to do, then you're susceptible to influence tactics. And I think most people are. So I think what's generally happened is that the government has become more powerful around the world over time, since the 19th century. And before the 19th century and during, there were kings, empires, authoritarian dictatorships, and so on. The Roman Empire, the word emperor really means dictator. And, so you had all of that. In the Age of Enlightenment, people began to question authority and roll it back. You had liberalism. And then as different interests in society gained some wealth, they began to seek to acquire more power. And so you're going back to a more medieval world now, where more and more power is centralized in central government. This is often couched as progressive, or the inevitable or historically necessary, or other kinds of nonsensical, mystical kinds of claims like that. But basically, I think people go along with it in large part because they don't think. Most people accept superficially what's being told to them, and don't question things like the claim that giving the central government the power to create money is totally fair and will be used fairly, when there's zero evidence of it being used fairly, but everyone just accepts that it's used fairly. But there's absolutely no reason to think that it's used fairly, or that it doesn't favor some groups. Yet everybody just accepts that it's used fairly, and then they're puzzled that there's income inequality. And in the same token, and I'm going to finish up with this because we're almost out of time, is the recent proposal for a central bank digital currency. which really has no economic virtue at all. It doesn't save money. It doesn't make people richer. It's not more efficient. There's really no value to it, except that it gives the federal government more control over you and your bank account. And this kind of idea has already been applied in Russia. I'm still in the 60s called the Soviet Union. In Russia and China that have adopted central bank digital currencies and already use it to attack people they don't like, that the regime doesn't like. In Russia, I've heard reports that expatriate Russians in Florida have already been had their money seized by the government, and in China, Xi Jinping's regime is, if people protest or not behaving in a way that's socially acceptable, the dictators turn their money off. So basically, you could say, well, it's not going to be done here, but it has been done here. It's already been done here many times. You had McCarthyism in the 50s. You had the Red Scare in the World War I period. You had all kinds of stuff. You had the internment of the Japanese during World War II in concentration camps. There's always been stuff like that here, and it's not going to change. And so, people who say it's perfectly safe to give the federal government unlimited authority over your life, I think such people are either they're either crazy or they're authoritarians themselves who like to be controlled. There are a lot of people who do want. A large share, maybe the majority. It could well be that the majority of the population wants to be told what to do, wants to be controlled, and then a lot of people are just naive. They're automatically processing information and they accept what they're told. I think the turning point for that was the famous radio broadcast of Orson Welles during the 1930s. You can listen to it on YouTube. It's available. He did a radio broadcast of the War of the Worlds based on H.G. Wells's book about the Earth getting invaded by Martians, and basically he framed it as though it were a news broadcast, so it sounded like it was really happening. And in fact, a large share of the American population believed that we were actually getting by Martians. And there were stories about farmers in New Jersey taking out shotguns and like shooting at planes and stuff like that, that basically people actually believed the fictional story on the radio. I think, I don't really know how the deep state works, how the CIA or FBI, or in those days, there were other organizations. The CIA was after World War II, but how these deep state kinds of organizations think or what they do. But I mean, seeing something like that would have to tell them that you can pretty much tell the public anything, and a large share of the public is going to believe what the media says, regardless of how insane it is or stupid. And so, I think we live in that world. We basically live in that world where automatic processing largely dominates public discourse. And so people just accept what they're told. I think people have started to react to it, and they realize, I think the media now, if you look at the statistics on public faith in the media, it's very low at this point. But I don't think that's really changed anything. They may be skeptical of the media, but they still believe it, and they do what they're told based on the media. And this is why the state has acquired increasing degrees of power around the world. It's not just in one country; it's everywhere. And the turning point, of course, was World War I, where propaganda propaganda was first, well, there was always propaganda, but it was experimented with and expanded on a great deal. And there was a lot of innovation in the area of propaganda during that period. And since then, the world has changed. It's become the last century, 110 years or so, has been, expansion of state power. Okay, so much for automatic processing, and we're almost out of time. So I will bid you adieu until Wednesday. Your discussion board is due tonight on Moneyball. See you next time. If you need to ask for anything or talk to me, you can do it after class.
Have a good
Oh,
one.
You too.
Professor, did you ever listen to Jeff Buckley?
No, I didn't get around to it. I'll do it right now. I feel that I'll let you down, but I'll do it right now. I just reloaded it.
Yeah. How was New Orleans, by the way?
Oh, I love New Orleans. Yeah, I've been there 3 times now. I love it every time. It's just great.
Yeah,
We
I went
stayed
for
at a
my first
hotel,
time.
right? What's that?
I went for my first time last spring. Same thing, spring break, and I went with friends, and we just loved it. A really
Cool.
great city.
Cool.
Yeah.
You were there for Mardi Gras, or
No, just spring break, like now, like this time
got
of year,
like
same
now?
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I
It
was
was
at a hotel right by Bourbon Street. I just had a
Oh,
blast.
that's sick.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. We did a lot of walking, and there's did you see Frenchman Street while you were there?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I did.
yeah, cool.
Yeah, we had a Airbnb. It was out like far enough that we had to take the trolley to get to the French Quarters. But we walked through the Garden District one day. We went on like a 3-hour walk, and yeah, it was just beautiful. Like tons of stores, and like the food, you can't go wrong with the food.
When I was there 2 years ago, I stayed at this place called the Columns, which is like a bar, and it's got a hotel in the back, but it's basically a bar with a small hotel attached. And it was right in that garden district on one of the main streets there. I forget which one, but it was really great. I had a great time. I was drinking.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. My
Was
my
I-
friend
What's
who
that?
loved it so much, my friend who loved it so much there, he actually bought a house in New Orleans.
Really?
Yeah, well, he
That's
does
how?
Airbnb. He does Airbnb, so he's also like, renting it out.
That's
But
cool.
but he loved it, so that's why he did it, because he was like, "This is a great city. If I ever want to come here, one for business, and two, like, I can have a place here."
That is so cool. So he's bought a place. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Love
yeah, yeah. I
it.
was I
Love
was
it.
like, "Yeah, man, do your thing." He was like, "I'll invite you guys whenever you guys want to go." I was like, "Yeah, perfect, get it then."
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's all night long, the wild music and everything. It's just
Oh
amazing.
yeah, yeah. I think there was a 2-day bender somewhere in that week I stayed there.
Yeah,
So yeah, I know what
yeah,
you
it's
mean.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife's trying to get away from drinking, so I didn't drink as much as I might have. But great restaurants.
Yeah,
It's like everything's really fun there. It's
yeah.
amazing.
No, the restaurants are just awesome. Like I don't think that we had a bad meal, and I'm a big seafood like lover, so like
Oh
that
yeah,
city's awesome. Yeah.
we ate at this little, like, it's like a luncheonette almost on our hotel was the Roosevelt Hotel, and
Okay.
there was, if you go back, I can recommend this this little place. Uh, uh, it was it was right next to the Roosevelt Hotel. What street was that? Um,
I'm on a computer too. I'll look it up.
yeah, I'm like, I don't see the address here. It was right off just a block or two from the Bourbon. It was like 2 or 3 blocks. It's called Roosevelt Way, I think. But there's this chain there called the Fiery Crab. It's like a local chain called the Fiery
Right.
Crab. Oh God, was that great? I thought that was better than expensive places. We got this. We often split dinner. It was like we got this like huge plate of seafood. It was like beyond belief. It was like incredible. I couldn't believe my eyes. So anyway,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, we had a big seafood boil.
my
too.
wife said we go to this Spanish place in New York, you know, she said like, it wasn't even like a quarter of what they gave you for like half the money, you know, it's like
Oh,
unbelievable.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to go back. Like he's actually going back tomorrow because he has to do some stuff with the Airbnb. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to come?" I was like, "I mean, I got school. I can't really go." But it would have been awesome to be able to go
Yeah,
again.
I'm jealous. So that's great. As he's just going there for business. That's nice. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really
all right.
nice.
Yeah, so please listen to Jeff Buckley. Please, it's so good.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Take care. Bye.